A man stands in a store holding a jacket that costs $320. He does what almost everyone does in that moment. He looks at the number and feels a small electric shock. $320 for a jacket. His brain starts moving fast. Too expensive, unnecessary, maybe later. Then, almost on cue, his attention slides toward a different rack where another jacket hangs beneath a brighter sign. $79. That number feels sane, responsible even, manageable. He buys the cheaper one, walks out with the private satisfaction of having been financially disciplined, and tells himself he made the smart choice. 2 winters later, the cheaper jacket is fraying at the cuffs, the zipper sticks, the lining has started to tear, and every cold morning he feels faintly irritated before the day has even begun. He buys another one, then another, because the second never fit quite right and the fabric aged badly. The expensive jacket is still on that rack in some alternate version of his life, still waiting to be understood properly. That is the trick money plays on people. The price you notice first is not always the cost that matters most. And once you understand that, an enormous number of impulse purchases lose their power almost immediately. Because one of the fastest ways to tell whether something is foolish, harmless, or secretly valuable is to stop asking the shallow question people are trained to ask. How much does it cost? Instead, ask the better one. How much does it cost each time I will actually use it? That is the cost per use rule. It sounds almost too simple to matter. Divide the price of an item by the number of times you realistically expect to use it. That is it. No philosophy degree, no complicated spreadsheet, no dramatic austerity. Just a brutally clarifying way to separate emotional buying from rational ownership. And yet this tiny calculation can change almost everything, because it does 2 things at the same time. It kills the fantasy around impulse purchases, and it exposes why some expensive items are not expensive at all in any meaningful long-term sense. Most people move through stores, websites, and online carts in a state of distorted perception. They react to sticker price, discount percentage, brand aura, urgency, aesthetics, status, novelty, and mood. They rarely stop long enough to ask whether the item will actually become part of daily life, or whether it is simply borrowing excitement from imagination. That distinction matters, because the modern economy is very good at selling the feeling of future use. It does not need you to use the product often. It only needs you to picture yourself using it. That is why people own kitchen appliances for the person they hope to become, clothes for occasions they rarely attend, hobby gear for energy levels they do not consistently have, productivity tools for schedules they never really build, and home decor for identities that look better in photos than in lived reality. The purchase feels justified because the imagined future use feels emotionally vivid. The actual use turns out to be thin, and that is where cost per use becomes almost embarrassingly useful. It drags the purchase out of the dream world and back into lived math. A $40 shirt worn twice is a $20 shirt each time it touched your body. A $1,200 treadmill used for 15 workouts is an $80 workout machine. A $90 kitchen gadget used once for a dinner party becomes an absurdly expensive memory disguised as practicality. A $2,000 sofa used every day for 7 years may quietly turn out to be one of the cheaper comfort purchases in your entire home. Same category, buying, very different reality. That is the first big revelation hidden inside this rule. Cheap things are often expensive. Expensive things are often cheap. The difference is not the number on the tag. The difference is how deeply the object enters your life. And once you start seeing purchases this way, impulse buying begins to lose its glamour. Because impulse buying depends on a certain kind of fog. It needs urgency. It needs emotional momentum. It needs you to stay zoomed in on the moment of acquisition rather than the life of ownership. The cost per use rule interrupts that trance. It forces time into the decision. It asks a question impulse cannot answer very well. Will you really use this enough to justify giving it a permanent claim on your money? That question is ruthless with fantasy purchases, Take a pair of boots that cost $250. If you already know you will wear them 4 times a week for 4 cold months a year, and they will last several years, the cost starts collapsing fast. Now take a trendy pair of shoes on sale for $60 that only work with one outfit. Pinch your feet after 40 minutes and are worn twice before sliding into the back of a closet. Which one was actually expensive? The wrong answer is the one most people give automatically, because price triggers emotion while usage reveals truth. This is not only about saving money, it is about exposing self-deception. A lot of spending is not really about objects at all. It is about hope, reward, boredom, identity, or relief. People do not buy a shirt. They buy a version of themselves in that shirt. They do not buy a fancy notebook. They buy the feeling that this might be the month they finally become organized. They do not buy a blender. They buy the story that from next Monday onward, they will be the kind of person who makes green smoothies at sunrise. There is nothing sinister about that. It is human. But it becomes expensive when imagined usage replaces observed behavior. The cost per use rule quietly forces honesty, not aspirational honesty, behavioral honesty. Not who you could be on your best future Tuesday, who you actually are. Do you really cook often enough to justify that pan set? Do you really travel enough to justify that premium luggage? Do you really read physical books in hardback, or do you mostly buy them with optimistic intent and then leave them stacked like moral decor? Do you really need the subscription box, the specialty gadget, the upgraded bag, the premium version, the extra pair, the backup system? Once the rule enters your mind, the seduction weakens. You stop hearing only the voice that says, "This would be nice to own." You start hearing another voice, quieter but more dangerous to impulse. How many times, really? And the word really does a lot of work there. Because the rule is only powerful if it is realistic, not generous, not flattering, realistic. People love to lie at this stage. They tell themselves the jacket will be worn 100 times. The camera will launch a creative habit. The exercise machine will change their health. The formal shoes will become part of regular life. The premium planner will reorganize the year. The expensive kitchen tool will save money in the long run. Sometimes they are right. Often they are staging evidence for a verdict they already want. So the rule works best when it uses your actual past as a witness. How often have you used similar items before? How often does your life produce the kind of moments this object belongs to? How often do you reach for things in this category without effort? If the answer is rarely, then the calculation gets ugly very fast. That ugliness is useful, because one of the most financially dangerous habits in modern life is mistaking low price for low risk. Small impulse buys feel harmless precisely because they do not look dramatic. A $30 gadget, a $45 accessory, a discounted kitchen item, a decorative purchase, a novelty tool. None of these feel like threats in isolation, but if they are used once, twice, or not at all, their cost per use becomes ridiculous. Worse, they accumulate. They take up space, require storage, create clutter, and quietly increase the cost of your home and your attention. Suddenly, a trail of cheap purchases becomes a very expensive lifestyle of underused objects. This is where the cost per use rule becomes more than a shopping filter. It becomes a defense system. It prevents money from being converted into dead weight. It also teaches a deeper lesson that most people learn too late. The best purchases are often boring. Not boring in quality, boring in predictability. A mattress you sleep on every night. Shoes you wear 4 days a week. A winter coat that protects you for years. A desk chair that holds your spine through thousands of working hours. Cookware you genuinely use. A laptop that earns you money or supports work you do constantly. A suitcase if you truly travel often. A good backpack if it goes with you nearly every day. A water filter if it meaningfully reduces recurring costs and gets used constantly. These things do not always produce the thrill of impulse. They often produce something better. Return. The second big revelation inside the cost per use rule is that it gives you permission to spend more intelligently. That matters because many people think being financially responsible means automatically choosing the cheapest option. Sometimes that is smart. Often it is just fear pretending to be discipline. The cheapest item is only the wisest choice if it performs well enough for the duration and frequency of your actual life. If it breaks quickly, frustrates you daily, needs replacement, or subtly makes routine harder, it may be the most expensive choice available. A $10 pair of kitchen tongs used twice a year is fine. A $10 office chair used 8 hours a day is insanity in disguise. A bargain suitcase for a once every 3 years trip may be perfectly rational. A bargain mattress you sleep on for a decade is a false economy with consequences your body will invoice later. That is why the rule does not simply tell you to buy less. It tells you where to spend on purpose. If something will be used constantly, and if better quality meaningfully improves durability, comfort, performance, or total lifespan, then paying more can be the frugal choice. Not glamorous, not indulgent. Frugal. The word changes meaning once you understand this. Frugal is not always paying less today. Sometimes it is paying once instead of repeatedly. Sometimes it is paying for lower friction. Sometimes it is paying to remove a daily annoyance that would otherwise tax your body, time, or patience for years. This is why a well-made pair of everyday shoes can be a better financial decision than several cheap pairs bought in sequence. Why a solid pan that lasts and cooks evenly can beat a parade of warped nonstick disappointments. Why good luggage for a frequent traveler can be cheaper than replacing cracked wheels and broken handles every year. Why a quality coat that survives 6 winters can humiliate a row of cheaper coats that never quite worked. The rule does not worship expensive things. It rewards durable usefulness. That distinction matters even more when you realize that use is not only physical, it can be emotional and practical too. Something may have a low cost per use because it supports sleep, comfort, concentration, safety, or peace. A blackout curtain for someone whose sleep is light, and noise-canceling headphones for someone who works in a loud environment every day. A better pillow for someone with chronic neck pain. A reliable coffee thermos that eliminates endless convenience spending. These items may look expensive when viewed as isolated purchases. Under the cost-per-use lens, they can become obvious bargains. Now here is where the rule becomes especially powerful against impulse. It delays the emotional high long enough for your smarter brain to catch up. Impulse thrives on immediacy. The item is here now. The sale ends tonight. The color might sell out. The algorithm has placed it perfectly in front of you. You can already see yourself happier, more attractive, more organized, more complete. All of that is happening in a compressed emotional window. The cost-per-use rule stretches the window. It introduces future time, and future time is where many bad purchases die. Because once you project the object into real life, the fantasy starts getting thinner. The dress becomes a one-event dress. The niche appliance becomes a cabinet resident. The trendy bag becomes a short season of excitement. The gadget becomes another charger in a drawer. The bargain item becomes clutter with a receipt. What looked good in the store starts looking lonely in the math. That is the moment the urge weakens. And if the urge survives the math, that tells you something too. If you still want the item after estimating real usage, after comparing alternatives, after removing the fantasy layer, and the cost per use still looks reasonable, then the purchase may actually deserve to happen. This is one of the healthiest parts of the rule. It does not turn money into punishment. It turns buying into a more honest conversation. You are allowed to spend. You are even allowed to spend generously, but the spending should have a life after checkout. A real one. There is another subtle advantage here, and it has to do with identity. Most people do not need more rules that make them feel guilty. They need rules that make them feel clear. Guilt is noisy. Clarity is quieter and more effective. The cost-per-use rule removes a lot of fake moral drama around money. Instead of asking whether a purchase is good or bad in some abstract sense, It asks whether the purchase matches the pattern of your actual life. That is cleaner, more adult, less theatrical. It means you can stop feeling superior for buying cheap things you barely use. You can stop feeling guilty for buying expensive things you use constantly. You can stop performing thrift and start practicing it. That shift is huge, because many people are surrounded by the wreckage of low-price virtue, cheap clothes that photograph well but wear badly, bargain appliances that irritated them every time they touched them, low-cost decor bought in moments of boredom, inexpensive hobby equipment purchased for the fantasy of becoming someone else. None of it looked dangerous because the entry price was modest. The cumulative damage appears later, in crowded rooms, thinner savings, and the vague sense that money keeps leaving without producing much value. The cost-per-use rule exposes that pattern with humiliating speed. And once it does, it also begins to teach taste, not luxury taste, functional taste. You start to prefer items that earn their place, items that work hard, last well, fit real habits, and reduce friction. You become less impressed by novelty and more impressed by reliability, less seduced by discounts, and more interested in longevity. You ask better questions. Will I use this weekly? Will I still want it after the mood passes? Does a better version save me replacements, frustration, or time? Does this belong to my real life or only to my imagination? These are wealth-building questions, even though they sound like shopping questions. Because wealth is not only built by what you invest, it is also built by what you refuse to keep buying badly. This becomes even more powerful when you connect cost per use to opportunity cost. Every poor purchase is not just money spent. It is money that no longer gets to become savings, debt freedom, or investment growth. A $90 impulse item used 3 times did not merely cost $30 per use. It also stole whatever that money might have become if it had remained unspent. Repeated over years, that matters. The cost per use rule helps because it reduces waste at the source. It prevents cash from being converted into objects that do not meaningfully serve your life. And when that cash stays free, it can finally do something stronger than decorating a shelf. It can build stability. It can compound. It can buy back future time. That is why the rule feels small but behaves big. It does not require a total lifestyle reinvention. It simply inserts one intelligent pause between desire and checkout. Yet that pause changes the quality of your entire spending pattern. You buy fewer fantasy items. You stop rewarding yourself with objects that quickly become chores. You become willing to pay for things that truly support daily life. You replace cheap repetition with deliberate ownership. And perhaps most importantly, you stop confusing the thrill of purchasing with the value of possessing. That confusion is expensive. Go back to the man in the store with the jacket in his hands. In one version of the story, he keeps reacting to sticker shock forever. He continues buying by price alone, mistaking low entry cost for wisdom, and slowly fills his life with replacements, disappointments, and things that never justify the space they take. In the other version, he learns the rule. Then he understands that a purchase is not a moment but a relationship. He pays attention to use, durability, and real habits. He buys less often but better. His closet improves. His spending calms down. His house carries fewer regrets. His money has more room to become something else. That is the real power of the cost per use rule. It does not merely help you shop smarter, it teaches you to value your life according to what genuinely serves it. And once you learn that, most impulse purchases do not just become unaffordable, they become unconvincing.